Thank you. Thanks for having me at Porto Academy again. My name is Matteo Guidoni. I'm principal of Salottobuono. Mine is a very small office. Basically, I'm working alone, although I pretend to be an organization. But there are people, of course, collaborating to the different projects. And today I would like to talk about a couple of public projects that I happen to work on in Italy. And I wanted to show you a bit of the Italian context. And when I talk about public works, I mean works that are projects that have been assigned by public administrations in a direct way, in this case, because below a certain parcel you can have them assigned. The level is 150,000 euro now, and they are all projects with an extremely low budget and with an extremely crazy way of assigning the works to the contractors, because the system is mainly based on the lower economical offer. So most of the time the contractor wins the project and then they are not able to do them. They just have to subcontract to others, and the project becomes sometimes very difficult to control in this system. The story starts, well, not the story of this project, of our involvement in the project, but the premises of this start in 2013 in Amélia, in a region in the north center of Italy, that was struck by an earthquake. Many structures were damaged, and many were demolished for the kind of damages they had. This is the case of Sant'Agostino, a town of 7,000 inhabitants, so a very small town, close to Ferrara in Amélia. And these images refer to the demolition of the town hall that was severely damaged, so it couldn't be repaired. The demolition of the town hall revealed this big void of almost 7,000 square meters. So you can imagine you can fit all the inhabitants in the square and have 1 square meter each and put them all here. So it's a huge space, and for a long time it remained as a sort of very undefined parking lot on which every Thursday the mercato, the market happened. You know? So it became mainly the square, the market square, with a monument, but most of the time, the other days of the week, it was occupied by cars. The municipality had money, let's say, for the reconstruction after the earthquake, so they started the process that began with the participatory process with the inhabitants, that projected all their wishes and needs and so on. You can imagine around here there are some commercial activities. There is a church here, and everybody, of course, had their own interests in the square, no? Which, let's say, had in some parts many aspects of typical Italian lifestyle, like sitting next to the bar and the tables, playing cards, the elderly people, and so on. After this long participatory process, we participated in a tender with engineering company, and we won it. So we became the architects of this project. And we had, of course, to take into account all the wishes and the indications that were coming from the participatory process. Basically, we wanted to show that there was a possibility to imagine four squares in one, because the sides of the square are, let's say, organized around these attractors like a church, so you can have a churchyard. You can have a perimeteral patio for these elderly people to play cards and do other things next to the shops. Then you can have a commerce infrastructure serving the weekly market, and you can have a fragment of a forest. Close by, there is an important fragment of originary forest. I don't know if it's the right definition, so Bosco planiziale is one of these fragments of originary nature of the Pianura Padana. The inhabitants are really emotionally related to this spot, and they wanted to let's say, catch a bit of it inside of the square. Mainly, they indicated this line, this diagonal line that connects the street next to the church to this portico looking outside to the originary forest. We had somehow to incorporate, it was mandatory to incorporate this sign, this diagonal into our project. The budget, I have to talk about money because it's important in these cases. The budget was around 1 million euro, 7,000 square meters, so you can imagine something like 150 euro per square meter. So we work mainly with the pavement and with vegetation and with this object here. This object basically, in our idea, connects all these different squares, all these different parts, the 4 parts that constitute the market square. The pavements are in concrete, pigmented concrete. We can talk again about colors now. I have to say that my relationship with color is very problematic in the sense that when I am thinking about a color for a project, then I see this color everywhere, and I become obsessed, and it becomes really tiring, and I sometimes get annoyed with it. But in this case, maybe the colors are really influenced by the pictures of Guido Guidi that, let's say, or by Luigi Ghirri, photographers that portrayed these areas of Italy with this kind of pale light colors. And you can imagine it's a sort of mystification, a sort of alteration of reality, but in fact, if you go there, with the effect of the light you have with the colors they use in the construction, in like the plaster, the bricks, and so on, you have this effect of a very pale image made of these bright light colors, like this pink. And then the object I was talking about is a roof. Put on the precise site where the municipality, the town hall was standing. The administration wanted to have a sort of memory of that building. They wanted to celebrate the memory, having a sign that is usually translated into a light on the pavement or something like that, that reminds of the position of the former building that was destructed by the earthquake. We wanted to push this ambition a bit more towards the future, so we proposed instead to have there a roof without a specific function. It's a roof in concrete, again, supported by 14 columns with a hole and with a little space for sitting around, with a little space for gathering around a little garden. And this roof will, at the same time, establish this relationship with the past, but also offer an infrastructure for the future and for the different activities taking place in the days in the square. So this is a roof, another color, a pale green overlapping to this brown pink pavement. These are basically details of the two, let's say, elements and the two materials used. This concrete is used both for the pavement and for the benches and for the other elements that are punctuating the ground. And this is the structure of the roof. So, sorry. Yeah, so the roof is accepting. It's a sort of ambiguous and not. It doesn't suggest any specific activities. Just provide, of course, shadow and defines a space where the activity of the market can be absorbed or other kind of activities happening at night. It's a quite bold structure. Its design, it's a bit massive, I would say. I can say it's a compromise between what we hoped for in terms of design and the budget and the capacities of the construction company, of the contractor. But in the end, yeah, it's something we learned to love as the inhabitants did in these months. This project was completed a couple of years ago, and you always have the difficulty in having the citizens appreciating the new project. Of course, it's in the center of the town. It's really a civic structure, so everybody has their own opinions, and these opinions in the beginning always diverge from yours as a designer, as an architect. But with time, we started to see signs of appreciation that are mainly given by the fact that people is going there and is taking the place, is occupying it with their own structures, with their own activities, and somehow when you feel like you lost control of the project and of the space, you feel better, no? You feel like it's becoming part of the citizens' daily landscape. Then we won an important prize with this project of the Market Square. It's a Gubbio Prize for interventions in historical context in Italy, and this success gave us the opportunity to receive new commissions for a few parks and the cemetery addition. I'm going to show one of the parks that is in process now. It's in another town that is now linked to the previous one by the fact that many municipalities in Italy became larger groups. Like this place is called Mirabello, and together with Sant'Agostino now they form one municipality, which is the municipality of Terre del Reno. We are always talking about context of, let's say, a spread organization of the territory, which is largely agricultural. You have a sprawl of buildings that then densify along certain roads like this. This becomes a town. Here we had another site where there was a school, a primary school, that was also demolished after the earthquake, but you can still see the footprint here with parts of the external spaces of the school. It's 900 square meters, and the budget here for construction was 400,000 euro, so more or less 100 euro for square meters. Again, a project that came at the end of a process of participation in which all the inhabitants, mainly young citizens, expressed their wishes, expressed their needs for a new park, a park with structures for sport, for facilities for outdoor activities and spectacles and so on. And in the beginning, the very let's say, the more clear request was to have a skate park here. So we start our preliminary proposal foresaw an organization with rooms. Part of the rooms are artificial and contain the main activities like the skate park, the playground, the theater. And part of them are natural rooms. And then they fuse together. They are connected by a circulation with the intention of opening up the park to the city as much as possible. Now the area is completely fenced. And we wanted to reduce the fenced area to the specific activities. So this room would be surrounded by these enclosures that could be closed at night and kept safe, while the other parts of the park should remain as open as possible. In the second step of the design, every room became an autonomous form. So we have the theater, which is an hexagonal room, and then you have the main playground, which is also conceived as a sort of internal plaza, an internal square. So we organized the seats instead of thinking about benches for this park. We thought about these steps, forming a sort of arena around the central square, because in this playground people could also organize parties or celebrations during the summer and so on. It's really an open air event space. And then there was, I mean, during the process, the kids changed their mind. They didn't want the skate park anymore. They wanted the calisthenics area, because now calisthenics became like substituted skateboarding in the wishes of teenagers mainly. But since we have already designed this area as a podium, because we didn't want to dig the ground to construct the skate park, it remained as a podium. And basically, the calisthenics activity, you know what is calisthenics, right? This sort of exercises because I didn't know it before doing this project, sorry. So I'm asking to make sure. So these activities that really exhibit the body, the physical performance and so on, will happen on the podium, so they will be even more spectacularized, I would say. And then you have the playground. Nature is, of course, an integral part of the project. We studied with the landscape designer, Francesca Benedetto, Yellow Office, the different changes of colors of the trees during the season. So each area has a specific set of trees. And all this natural system integrates with the rooms, with the artificial rooms. A few other images of the model. When we were doing the square, we realized that we always forget to design lamps, light stands during these projects of public spaces. And we realized how important it is to think about these elements, these technical elements, and because in the end the budget is finished, you have to accept every kind of thing that the administration decides to put in the park. So here, from the beginning, we thought about lights as something integrated with the structures of the 3 rooms. So these 3 rooms would also become sort of big-scale lamps for the park at night. With this frame structure varying between 4.85 and 6 meters, which is only 8 centimeter, 8 by 8 in plan. This is the condition of the construction site now. The story is that the construction site had to last 6 months, Instead, we are 2.5 years after now. There were many breaks. Before there was a pandemic, there was of course, the pandemic, the war, the rise of prices of materials, and so on and so forth. Every kind of accident influenced the procedure, and yeah, with administrations you cannot just ask for more money because the price increased. You need to wait for the national, how it's called, adaptation of prices of construction, and that didn't happen, or it takes a very long time. So we had to reduce, to come to the bone of the project. These concrete structures, you can see the quality of the concrete. Being in Switzerland, I'm a bit like ashamed of what I am presenting here, but it's of course, let's say, the concrete that was poured here was not meant to be visible, no? But in the end, we tried to finish it as if it was visible, accepting a certain degree of mistake, a certain degree of not good finishing. These structures were done quite long ago, and the metallic structure came a lot later, with a series of problems connected to this, to the time of waiting. What I like is the fact that this concrete structure, they already look like ruins. And on these ruins, we are now building a new project. It's like two projects coming in two different times, maybe assuming also from two different authors or two different contexts. Yeah, somebody said as architect we have to design good ruins. I think in this case the ruins are really present. The condition of the construction site is this one, but it's proceeding, and I think by November it will be finally finished. The most poetic part of the project, the toilet, with its concrete. Yeah, and this is the situation. Then another commission we had after the square was for the addition and the idea of completing this cemetery, again in a similar town, in another part of Amélia, Crevalcore. The cemetery of Crevalcore is almost like a floating island in the countryside. And you can see that the final, let's say, end of this system of courtyards is not finished, and we were commissioned to give a final finishing to the structure. It's this sort of neoclassical organization into squarish courtyards with porticos and so on. We start from the beginning with sketching, reasoning around the quality of the open space that we wanted to produce rather than the building. So the idea was to try to define a different proportion, a different size of the final courtyard. And the main problem with projects of cemeteries in Italy is that you make a project and then they constructed by phases, waiting for the need of new loculi or new graveyards, and waiting for the money to build them. No? So most of the time they are built fragment by fragment as an addition of pieces. And with this project we tried to conceive a structure that could give immediately a sort of final image of the courtyard, a final frame, a final enclosure on which the addition, and with let's say, a frame with main spaces for the ossuaries that were needed and for the little chapel, little preparation room for burial, and the toilet with services also with water for the plants and so on. And then imagining that while this is a concrete structure that acts almost like a kind of infrastructure that can be implemented and can accept incremental growth of the ossuaries through time, of locally through time. So this would be the final step of construction. These sketches basically foresee some possibilities of relation between the loculi and the main structure in section, and with the, let's say, main chapels and objects that are placed around it. And in the general plan, this is the first phase of construction, and this would be the final phase of construction. So, very rough study model that foresees the initial phase from inside and from the outside. And then, yeah, these are some views of these rooms that contain the toilets and other activities, with these parts meant to be open, no, with glass, keeping the light from outside. And this is the final condition in which you have built all the loculi around. So basically the frame is established since moment zero, and then it simply becomes filled with these elements that are nothing but prefabricated concrete elements of the loculi attached to the structure. Now we submitted the final design, and the project is at the moment on hold, waiting for the first round of money in order to start building it. Yeah, finally, I would like to talk a little bit about the work, of course, of Alvaro Siza, that we tried to, well, it's really, in my opinion, connected. I was interested in this project by Alvaro Siza of 1977 because it really connects, I think, to the condition of work with public that I am facing at the moment. So last year I proposed a studio in the frame of the Porto Academy on this project. The project is the Quinta da Malagueira. Here we see one of the first, probably the first visit by Alvaro Siza on the site of close to the city of Évora in the south of Portugal, in Alentejo. I think its project is really well known, but just a little note. It's a project that was born, let's say, after the Carnage Revolution in the 25th of April 1974. The revolution was, let's say, created, of course, with the coup d'etat, but also in line with the extreme housing shortage in Portugal at the time that pushed citizens to, let's say, ask for new decent housing. And it's a project with which Alvaro Siza started to keep record of its sketches. No, it's the first sketchbook by Alvaro Siza is connected to this project. You see here there is a note talking about Évora. Before he was only dealing with a small residential project, and this is the first big public commission. It's a project that took him 20 years to complete. And it's still not yet completed. They are still talking there about the construction of one of the main public spaces, which is the Half Dome. But yeah, 1,200 houses planned. But what we were interested in specifically was this amazing infrastructure that is the starting point of the project, and it's also the main structuring element of all the project of Quinta da Malagueira, which is the so-called conduta. The conduta means aqueduct. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not only carrying water, but also electricity, phone lines, other kind of infrastructure, all the let's say basic infrastructure that serve the houses. And this conduta is, yeah, in the words of Sisa, of course, inspired and linked to the aqueduct that is already present in Évora of the 16th century, but the intention also of Sisa was to give the project another scale, another monumental scale, opposed or let's say that completes the scale of the housing, which is based on a variation on one type, that is the patio house, while the scale of the conduta is another one that suggests a public scale, that suggests a civic scale, and it's really conceived as a contemporary aqueduct in the city. So this is the city of Évora in the background, and here the presence of this new infrastructure. So last year at Porto Academy, we worked a lot around this object that we didn't manage to visit during the days of the Porto Academy, because even if it's in Portugal, it's quite far from Porto. I guess 4 hours far from Porto. And so we worked on this object, taking into consideration a sort of generic section of it, thinking about possibilities of generating little possibility of public spaces around the object of the conduta. Public spaces that are, let's say, the part of the project of Sisa that are still missing today, that are still not present, even if they were planned, because the urgency of building houses was, of course, the main thing. So we started to work around the idea of how to reconsider water around the structure, observing, first of all, we composed this that we called Book of Copies, like a series of, a collection of photocopies around different topics connected to the water, like leaking, or gutters, or fountains, or showers, public baths, washed areas of several kind. And then the output, I would say, is a huge collective drawing in axonometric that we have done with the students. So the different students were working on personal projects, but then they were all connected in this huge drawing, forming sort of big collective endeavor that then ended in the exhibition in the spaces of the FAUP, together with the work of all the other colleagues. Finally, this year, we wanted to bring the work on the conduta to the students of Politecnico. No? We gave them what their colleagues have produced, and we started again. And finally, we were able to go to Évora and spend a couple of days there, observing the specificity of many corners, or many variations on this big, bold, and at the same time humble object, no? That is constructed with poor materials. It's it's a concrete structure then filled with concrete blocks, but it offers many possibilities of, let's say, use under it, and many occasions on variation on architecture that most of the time seems to be improvised, not improvised, but partially adapted during the construction. Quinta da Maria Gueira is full of cars. There is a big car culture there, and these cars are always interfering with this portico of the Conduta. And yeah, you can say the project was not foreseeing such an amount of cars growing through the years. You have these moments of clash. These are all pictures taken by, I forgot to mention the pictures of Porto Academy were taken by Ivo Tavares. These are contact sheets done by Louis de Bell during our visit. It's a choice of a large number of photos he's taken and with which we are trying to make a book. Moments of clashes, moments of poetry, I don't know, moments in which you suggest the possibility of a little space for sitting or for staying is suggested. Here you can see the actual size of the infrastructure compared to the size of the Conduta. No? So it has a walkable space here for the operation of maintenance and so on, but these are basically the structure that are running through this big public object. So one of the, I can say, excuses for building such a thing was that an elevated structure would cost less than digging the ground to put the infrastructure. To me, it's really like an excuse because, I mean, this is evident here, in my opinion. Other possibilities of spaces to be, and the role of the portico in shading some parts of the neighborhood. Here you see, well, there are some notes where you clearly see the intricate connection between the parts of the Conduta and the fact that they were solved on site. You know? We talked to Nuno Ribeiro Lopes, the architect, the managing architect of the project, and he said that this, yeah, like they just really didn't understand, or they calculated the height of the different parts in a wrong way, and when they come here, they had to solve with something that then became very expressive, but it was generated by a sort of mistake. The presence of other infrastructural elements like the rooms for electricity cabins. Sometimes when the Conduta meets the walls, it gets covered with plaster and painted like the walls, forming this series of porticos. You have some other incredibly expressive bugnato columns formed just by the concrete blocks. And sometimes the Conduta goes out of the built environment and gets into the open space of the countryside. Well, with the students, we started to imagine a series of intervention around, under, touched, parasiting the Conduta, starting from the scale really of the confetti, some little elements that could be placed in many parts along the Conduta and become a little fountain, or become, yeah, another kind of fountain that parasites the columns, a lavatory, or even a collective kitchen using the water of the Conduta, and so on. And then larger structure that can become a support for agriculture. The community there has still a very strong link with the agricultural production. So elements like water towers that can be connected to the conduta and serve the agricultural activities. Some gardens, like lemon garden, that is generated by the possibility of having water from the conduta. Or an irrigation plan with a water cannon at really on top of the head of this object, this element. And then also reasoning around the car culture, the conduta can also host car washing activities. So we imagine to, parasite it in a way that the car can go through and be washed. This is our group, sit on an amazing theater that was one of the few public objects finally built in the project by CISA. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo. Okay, questions?
Hi, thanks for the lecture. I was really interested by your insights about working, I guess, with public administration and government, and I guess in my experience, it's always where the architectural outcome is never really guaranteed. So I wanted to kind of understand how your design process is informed by this unpredictability, and how do you kind of maintain the clarity of the design when budget and bureaucracy is kind of working against you all the time?
Yeah, sometimes they are working against us, sometimes they are collaborating. I have to say that there are some, especially one key figure in the processes in the Italian system, which is the so-called RUP, that is the sole responsible of the procedure. Basically, it's the person that has the money and has also the responsibility on how to spend this money. So sometimes you find the RUP which is more, I don't know, maybe more light-minded and brave and willing to support your project and I don't know, help you in any possible way, facing the risk of being sued for many reasons. I have to say the responsibility of them is enormous because they manage public money. In other cases, you have RUP that is just protecting themselves and trying to get out of the project with less problems as possible. So this is one very important factor I can tell, because in the different projects we had different kind of RUPs and we could observe how it really influenced the idea of completing the project in a good way. Then you have probably seen also in the methods of representation that some qualities of the project are sometimes loosely defined as, let's say, a strategy to adapt to the conditions that are presented along the process and you cannot foresee in the beginning. And sometimes you can say that if you define every detail in a better way, then you will achieve that kind of detail. This is maybe true for other kind of projects. In these cases, I observed that it's really better to maintain this possibility of adaptation, and sometimes this finds let's say, an equivalent in the design process in keeping some choices as abstract as possible. Architectural representation, for me, is always has to contain a certain degree of abstraction, but in this case, in particular, much more. Also foreseeing the possibility that somebody will introduce their actions and their changes into it. So yeah, for me it's really a matter also of how you talk about these projects. I am trying to show them and to communicate them, and I understand that I cannot adopt the same canons of representation that, I don't know, Swiss architecture can have, or other kind of projects, and you have to find your own new narration. When you talk with an administration, they are not difficult clients in general. They just want to have all the let's say, the requests coming from the participatory process that sometimes are not really filtered, are not managed in a, let's say, in a good way. So they come with a lot of needs and requests, and they want to have the theater, but they also want to have the barbecue, and they also want to have the... So it's a list of things that you have to accomplish, no? And once you show them that you have done, you checked all the list, for them, it's okay. No? Then it's a problem for you as an architect to control what comes next. So I would say that, yeah, this idea of working with a certain degree of abstraction is a strategy that also maybe connects to the way architecture has always been carried on in the past, in which you had to define some rules, some fixed points, and then somebody will come after you, and maybe, I don't know, you will die before your project is built, so somebody else will have to keep it going and understand your intentions and interpret them in possibly in a way that is not too distant from your ideas.
Thank you for the lecture, and I wanted to thank you for another lecture in UAV in Venice. It was very inspiring. I still think about some projects up until this day.
Recent one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask about this collective decision when you are facing, as an architect, a demand from a group of people, and they are quite diverse and, I would say, conservative, when they're like extremely attached to the place of their normal daily activity, and you are the one who is visiting. Do you need any sort of like backup, or like what is the, if they represent their needs and they are being clear about it, like what is your role as an architect? Like how, until which point are you like listening to this emotional, nostalgic, I don't know, melancholic demands, or like when is the point when you start to be analytical and think about actually constructing things and not just like talking and imagining, let's say?
Yeah, sometimes the demands are nostalgic and silly, but sometimes are really poignant, and maybe you didn't think about them, and maybe there are specific requests that you realize can influence your project a lot. But in this sense, I would say that the work of CISA for the Quinta da Malagueira is, let's say, emblematic, and it's really interesting to look at it, because at the time, in the revolutionary context, there was this idea that the architect is the hand of the people. No? So the people establish their own needs and their own requests, and then the architect is a technician that just have to, let's say, put them on paper and on the ground. Caesar opposed this a lot, and maybe, yeah, he did better than other architects that were used to work with the public and with the participatory processes, because they have done nothing else before in their lives, while he was designing for private clients. So he was used to have sort of fights and interactions and discuss the projects and so on. So he took a bit of this attitude there, and he wanted to assert the figure of the architect as a crucial key figure that can translate these demands into a project. So, in a way, the answer is trying to be not passive. Also, because I said these participatory processes can be really dangerous if they are not managed. They have to be guided. No? Otherwise, you just have an accumulation of needs, and of course everyone's needs is different from another, because we are all different. So without any mediation, then the architect receives this kind of enormous and formless kind of request. So you just put your knowledge, your technical skill, your observation of the context of the for me, it's really important to put your feet on the ground, go there, observe, and understand also the modes of living, the specific use of the space that citizens do, and yeah, and also have a not preconceived idea of what a square should be, what a park should be, because every context then offers a particular interpretation of it, every cultural context and also every physical context. As I was showing, these conditions in which we worked are really dispersed, so it's really difficult to establish a center. No, you cannot really talk about centralities. You just have to talk about spots of intensity that you can generate in the landscape, no? Because there is no structure like the structure of larger cities or historical cities, in which you can clearly identify what is the center, what is the periphery, and so this is a sort of big continuous periphery and agricultural landscape in which you can establish some spots of intensity. And yeah, working in this context taught me this. Maybe in other contexts in the future, I don't know.
Is it on now?
Hi.
Hi. I mean, you pretty much covered it with that, but I was curious to know more about what you considered the political or social symbolism of the conduta and what it continues to teach you.
So the question is how I consider the political...
The symbolism of the conductors as kind of shared infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, there is not much symbolism. There is more a change of scale, as I was trying to say, and this change of scale is enough to establish another level, which is a civic level of architecture, because then the rest of the project is individual houses. So having a simple addition of individual houses without a structure that refers to a civic scale would I don't know, disintegrate also the political endeavor of this project. But I am talking about scale and not symbols, because I think the object doesn't symbolize anything. Well, it's linked to this idea of of the aqueduct, of the Roman aqueduct or historical aqueducts, and their relationship also with the built environment that is sometimes clashing, and interlocked with the object. But to me, in this case, it's just a matter of scale, because then the object is, again, really humble, really poor in its construction. And it's maybe maybe the only project I can deal with of CISA, because I am not an expert with CISA, so I cannot talk about his language as many other experts in Portugal can do. But I can relate to that object there, because it's sort of 0 degree of refinement, but a constant invention, in every corner, in every spot, in every kind of interaction with it. And that, in my opinion, makes the political and civic role of that particular object.
Hey, Matteo.
Ciao.
Thanks for the
I didn't
lecture.
mention you were one of the teaching assistants in this workshop, together with other 2 great persons, so thank you.
You're welcome. It was, this lecture for me was really emotional on in many ways. And first of all, I grew up in the territory that you presented at the beginning of the lecture, and it's a territory that can be quite brutal sometimes, and at the same time really delicate and fragile to operate in. And it's territory that I think it still has some quite intangible and ephemeral quality. And for me, it was quite amazing how you catch them in your project, especially in the square in Sant'Agostino, which is such a suspended place, and you really, I think, personally caught the atmosphere, and you created a great place. And second of all, it was also for me interesting to see the difficulties of working in the Italian context, and difficulties that led many people like me to go abroad to gain some experience, and forced by the conditions. And I was wondering, with all your experience in Italy in many sites, which are if you foresee any possibility, or if you have any advice for young professionals or older professionals to establish a dialogue with the architectural context in Italy. You also, you curated recently in the Triennale something that was really related to this, so I would like you to maybe explain more, or what is your opinion about it?
Well, my opinion is, thank you for the question. I think it's really important to use this context and to work in this context, not trying to find excuses, for designing bad architecture. So the level is low, the context is what it is, the money is little, so I just throw something. Instead, it has really to be an opportunity to think about the conditions, and think about, maybe for me, it's also, we have to think about the canon of architecture in Italy, in this moment. There are many young students that, of course, from Milano are coming here, or in Zurich to learn and to study architecture, and this is, of course, very valuable. They let's say, it's the best place to be nowadays to study here, and so everybody is in this moment. For instance, in the Milanese context, everybody is really connected to Switzerland, but we have to understand that from some points of view, then the Swiss canon is not adaptable to the Italian condition. And we have to learn how to make it ours. We have to maybe learn how to look at other cultures. And for me, Portugal was amazing in this sense, because it somehow it has the same political, economical, not the same, but similar political, economical, social even conditions like in Italy. So we have to be a bit critical and try to observe more closely what is our context without simply trying to imitate something that comes from a context that is not helping us, and it will be really frustrating to try to compare, our work with the work that can happen in Ticino or even in Alto Adige, I don't know, which is a sort of enclave in Italy. So my suggestion is to adopt this sort of critical approach towards what you are learning, which is really valuable, but then you have to start criticizing when you come back to your context, because the political and economical situation will not change quickly, at least.
Thank you. It was a very inspiring and moving lecture for me. To continue what you just said, I assume that the ground is shifting also in the Swiss condition, even though, of course, economically and also politically, architecture has more support in Switzerland than in Italy. And I say this with the biggest regret, because I know so many great Italian architecture from the past, and I see people like you or Bauku or others struggle in Italy. And that's why I was very touched by the work that you showed, and I'm also what you just said about the conditions and these places. But I experienced you, or following your work, I think we share an incredible interest in form, in architecture as a language, and also in a kind of a joyful appropriation of, say, postmodern architecture, and try to figure out what was the potential of postmodern architecture that kind of never happened. Looking at your most recent work that you just showed, I was particularly touched by the question of color. And you mentioned Luigi Ghiri and the paleness of color. And I thought that the pale green roof with this pale light condition at night, it just, evokes so much, even though the structure is very simple and basic, but it evokes so much that I know from images of Ghiri in Kodachrome and everything. And also the steel, the way you painted it, and the paleness of the concrete. So I was wondering, just from architect to architect and among architects, is this something that you see as a possibility to look with a loving eye in conditions like that, and to work with empathy on emotions or connections to atmosphere that before that maybe was not present in your work?
That's really interesting and a bit psychoanalytical in a way. I will have to think a lot about it, but I can say that I somehow needed this filter when you approach this kind of context that can be lovely, can be sublime in some parts, but can be also horrible and can really turn you down if you are not, let's say, if you don't want to adopt a positive and a positive approach. And to me, having a filter of artists that looked at the same place and tried to reveal the delicacy and the poetry and the marvel that you can sometimes find in these places. For instance, in all this idea of the representation of the ordinary, the representation of the banal, of the structures that are not designed, but they are just present in the territory, and you almost redesign them by looking at them. was in my case fundamental because yeah, it's a training for your eye and it's a training for your emotions. And yeah, then as I was saying, the color has always been a problematic issue for me. I think all the projects I've done are somehow colorful. I've never done pure white project. But every time was really a struggle because yeah, the choice of a color is something like I don't know. I think I really envy these architects that have decided for one color and they just go with it, or I don't know, modern architects that just decided for white and go with it. But I probably had the same question for you before. I really wanted to understand what was the first moment when you decided there should be a color, a specific color in this project, especially from considering the context you're coming from that is not particularly colorful in architecture, no, not in life in general, or maybe yeah. But yeah, for me, the question of color is always really delicate and problematic, and not. For instance, I'm not sure that I am like colorful in any occasion, no, or the palette of color should be always the same, or I have a favorite color that I try to always introduce in the project. Every color is a sort of discovery. For instance, the green, the red structures there in the park. Yeah, there are so many shades of red, and you are obsessed with which one is better and so on, and then you end up in talking to the company, and they can only offer, I don't know, 3 or 4 possibilities, and you try to get close to it, but then you adapt the color of the concrete according to it in order to match them better. For instance, the concrete structure should have been much brighter, much lighter in color, but then we wanted, I mean, when we had the limited number of choices that were offered to us, and we had to choose one because all the others were too expensive, then we went for that sort of brick color of the concrete, and we tried to adapt then the red of the metallic structure. Sorry, I'm going now into details of, so I don't know if I can answer in general terms to your question. These are specific aspects, but just to make you participate in my ideas. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry to go back to the, thank you first of all. I don't want to take so much time. I think everyone wants to go for lunch, but going back to the participatory process, there is something that I can relate a lot. I just wanted to ask you 2 questions. One is if you were involved during the participatory process, or did you receive a commission directly already with the information? And if you were involved, that communication with the people, which kind of tools did you use to communicate with them? And finally, I just wanted to ask if that changed the way you see a profession that we do and influenced the way you approach the projects with private and public commissions. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question, but unfortunately I was never involved in the participatory processes of this project. They happened way many years before, a few years before I knew I was going to make the project. So they happened in a completely separate moment and environment and so on. There were architects in charge of managing the process, and I simply received the output. These outputs are sometimes, I don't know, kids' drawings on paper, that are extremely interesting sometimes. You discover incredible things. Lists of I don't know, functions or programs that they want. And then in some cases, like in the case of the square, even traces that they didn't want to abandon in any case. For me, I don't know, for the project of the square, in the beginning I was absolutely against this diagonal cut. To me, it was very clear that the market square had to be more somehow rational, no? But it was impossible. It was mandatory to try in any possible way to interpret this precise sign that was drawn on the map, on the plan, and include it in the project. In the end, for us, was just a change of the pattern of the pavement, and a particular alignment of the structure of the roof, and the presence of the trees on one side and not on the other side. But sometimes even details that you wouldn't agree with, you just need to interpret them and to take them into account. Participation in Italy had a long, let's say, it has a long history with Giancarlo De Carlo and so on that stressed how participation is not good in itself if it's not managed in a proper way. It can lead really to disastrous conclusions. Yeah, so I didn't take part in that processes, and I received the commission. Well, the square was, we won this tender. For the other was a direct commission based on the fact that the fee was below 150,000 euro. So the municipality can assign directly. Above that, they have to make a competition.